is with great joy that I introduce Ilyse Kusnetz.
Quick question. How many of you guys in the audience are students? Oh, okay, wow, okay. Second question. How many of you are here for extra credit? Oh, wow, that's good. Sorry. Okay. Well, we're going to put the extra in extra credit. We're going to blow the roof off the place. All right. I'm going to start out reading that poem that Suzanne mentioned, which is called Match Girls. And then we'll see how it goes from there. How you guys doing? Yeah? All right. Okay, awesome. It's amazing to be here. So thanks for having me. And I'm going to probably read for about 25 minutes. So, okay. First poem, Match Girls. I was really intrigued to find out that an ancient emperor from China thought he could achieve eternal life by consuming mercury. Yeah, just a little bit. I don't think it worked out so well for him, but yeah. But I was also intrigued by the fact that at the same time, that's something that a lot of the workers in America were poisoned with, and other substances too, such as radium and phosphorus. Working conditions, you know, when writers weren't unionized, when workers weren't unionized, that's a slip of the tongue there. Right? When workers weren't unionized, working conditions were terrible. You know, sometimes the buildings themselves would collapse around them, or they would be subject to working with poisonous substances. And unions really help to improve workers' rights. So when I first wrote this poem, this was a time when unions were really being torn apart in a lot of places. And I thought, you know, if people could look back and see, you know, what it was like without them and think about that, that maybe a lot of people who dismissed unions would maybe think twice, you know. The workers in Bangladesh, for example, their building collapsed around them, and I don't think they were unionized, you know. So it's something that struck me very much, and the contrast between the people who were being poisoned and the emperor who was thinking that this is going to make him live forever. So, without further ado, Match Girls. In the factories of America during the 19th century, girls hired to make matches would dip the match ends into a chemical vat, then lick the tips to make them stiff. Phosphorus vapor filled the air, a poison about which no one warned them. So when their teeth fell out and their jaws rotted like bad fruit, it was too late. It was not the first time such things happened. Bent at their workstations, women in the 18th century cured ladies' hats with mercury. Their legacy, blushing, aching limbs, a plague of rashes, parchment-thin pages of sloughed skin, curled and cracked, minds deranged. They could not know they shared a fate with Emperor Qin Shi Huang, who, seeking eternal life, swallowed pills laced with mercury. He built the Great Wall and unified China, then outlawed all religions not sanctioned by the state, burned treatises on history, politics, and art. Scholars who dared possess such things, he buried alive. His body lies in a vast mausoleum guarded by a terracotta army. Of the factory girls, mouths opening below earth, their bodies burning like forbidden books, we know almost nothing. Small Hours, and it's about my mother she died of breast cancer. It spread, and she died back in 2004, and but it's also about my relationship with her. So, how many difficult relationships with one parent or the other? Yeah, or you can just pretend to raise your hand. One. So, most of the time, right? So you have, when you write, you're writing about a subject, but there's also this subtext there, this tension that's driving the piece of writing. And it's about more than just what's on the surface. It's like what the engine of the piece is. And so I would say on the surface, this poem is about my mother's cancer, and the engine driving it is the relationship that we had. So it's called Small Hours. I was shocked that last Thanksgiving to see my mother, lifelong enemy of stray threads, smudged faces, raised voices, in pajamas at the dining room table, not wearing her wig. Hair a scatter of pin feathers stuck to her scalp. It was the last night she spent at home, my father refusing to admit her decline, and so when he urged her farther, a little farther, she collapsed onto the bathroom floor. Still, he wouldn't dial the ambulance. I remember her long ago advice to me. It takes fewer muscles to smile than it does to frown. As if unhappiness were only a facial expression. The heart's desire wafting along a flower-lined path of least resistance. Weeks later, I stood beside her hospital bed. Waking, she'd suck orange slices, clown smiles. Tongue so parched, each word she tried to utter stuck in her mouth like driftwood. Though once during the small hours, I heard her sigh to herself, "Oh, well." And because parents demand equal time in poetry, here's one about my dad. It's called Kilter. I'm 9 years old, surprised to hear my father, a working man, a tinker of all things mechanical, say, "shim." On his lips, it seems a frivolous word, until he explains, it's a thing you slide underneath other things. And this was to keep them on an even kilter, to solve, like an equation, the tick-tock of unsteadiness. He shims the folded paper into place. Not to be confused with shivs, he says, which are used to stab people in prison. But shim, so close to shimmer, something lit and winking, rippling in moonlight, like the ocean or the grace of working men, poised between love and temper. How to restore, wielding the thinnest of objects, this balance to the world. Okay. So now we're going to go back in time, and I'm going to read a poem. My uncle, two of my cousins are in the audience. I won't say which cousin whose father this is, but he was in World War II. He was a baker and a medic, and he used to tell me stories about his time in the army. And actually, my cousin is in this poem, so, but I won't reveal, who it is. You can just guess. Look around afterwards, like, who was that? So, this is called Hitler's Alarm Clock, 1945. And written on a stone marker outside the house in Brana where Hitler lived as a boy, is written, there's a stone engraved with the saying, "For peace, freedom, and democracy. Never again fascism. Millions of dead admonish." So, just gonna take a wee sip here. It's just water, it's not whiskey. No one saw the Jewish baker snatch it from its bedside perch and slip it into his overcoat. Hitler's childhood room preserved down to a pair of gabardine short trousers hanging over his chair. My uncle carried that clock the rest of the war, woke each morning to its empty crowing, then took it back to Brooklyn. 3 years later, his toddler sons, twin prodigies, stole it from his drawer, dismantling the mechanism beyond repair. Every wheel and cog and spring spread across the living room table like airplane wreckage he'd seen, a senseless array of parts, forlorn as disassembled countries, or memories whose narratives lie lost and scattered like ash. This next poem is based on a film I saw, sort of addicted to the History Channel. Do I want to admit? Yeah, I'll admit that. Yeah, watched a lot of History Channel, sort of addicted to information about World War II. It's just, for some reason, that period in history, I don't know if because there's a family connection or it's just because it was a time in history when the world felt so insane. But this was based on an actual movie that they had, an archival footage. And that's what it's called, archival footage. Bodies piled like lumber, tottering bodies withered to bone, lampshades fashioned of human skin, some displaying tattoos. Shrunken head paperweights, bisected heads preserved and suspended in transparent resin, neatly labeled 2 halves of the Jew brain. Local townspeople trucked in. Now you can't tell the world you didn't know. One woman presses a handkerchief to mouth and nose. A man dizzily cradles his chin. Look closely. You can see history rooting in their bodies, the horror of it pulling out their tongues. Okay. So, I think I'm going to go for a lighter note after that. That's okay. All right. This is a poem called "Jesus Has Risen." It's pretty self-explanatory. Jesus has risen. Every Easter, when I observe the sign in my neighbor's yard, I can't help but imagine Jesus as a loaf of bread, kneaded to doughy perfection, his flesh suffused with yeast and covered by the robe of a towel. Because such transformations must happen in secret, in the darkness of a cave or a bowl. Continuing on the happy note, I'm going to read a love poem. Every reading should have at least one love poem. It's called A Hampshire Field at Sunset. Wheels of hay, sun-fired, each a sealed universe, replete, imperturbable. Shadows are sarsens here, Autumn spilled on the ground, winter gathering in the sky. Come to bed tonight. Curl your body into mine. From next year's furrows, the braided gold will rise. Time enough, my love, to exhale the breath we did not know we were holding for this world. Okay. I'm going to read two more poems. One, it's interesting, I think, when you, at certain points in your life, you kind of wonder if you're going to end up like your mother, your father, or both. How many things do you have in common with them? How different are you? What pitfalls happen to them? Will they happen to you? That sort of thing. Raise your hand if you've had a moment or two of anxiety about that. Okay. You're not alone. You're not alone. For me, sadly, I told you my mother passed away from cancer, and I found out about just over 2 years ago that I had cancer. So it was a weird moment, not just because of the whole cancer thing. Just show of hands, people who know somebody, family or friends who had cancer or died of cancer. If you look around, it's a modern plague. It really is, and there are whole hospitals dedicated to people with cancer, and I wish they would hurry up and find a cure. So, not just for me, but a lot for me. So, but I wrote. In this book, I only wrote one poem about that, and I thought I'd read it because it felt like today when I saw my child at home, I thought, you traveled such a long way in life, and there are certain moments that change you forever. I left New York. I had lots of different experiences, wonderful experiences. I met my husband. My mother was diagnosed and died of cancer, and then I was diagnosed. And as a writer, you're kind of forced into a position where the first thing people tell you after, whether they say after you tell them you got cancer, I'm so sorry. The second thing they say if they're a writer and they know you're a writer is, are you writing about this? So it's almost comical because it's a kind of, like I said before, that go-to process. I'm actually not. I think it's because I'm still processing, and I haven't found my way out. But I did write this one poem, which is the last poem in the book. So I'll share it, and then I'm going to read one final poem. So, and I hope all of you who have friends and family, if they have cancer, I hope that they beat that bastard. So, this is called Holding Albert Einstein's Hand. I'm sorry, this is a community college. Can I say bastard? Okay. Holding Albert Einstein's hand. The corpse tree full of wasps, their razoring wings outside my hospital window, in 2s and 3s returning. And so it goes, and so it goes. A woman knows what a woman knows. Words for losing places. Hiraeth, Sodad, Morinha, Dor. The 4 chaise lounges of the apocalypse wait for us on the sands, knowing time is a rope, a deck of cards, an empty glass. This place to sit by the ocean, watch sanderlings run from the waves, the long-fingered light of late afternoon. Fear of disintegration hollows out my bones. I am becoming bird. A sparrow flew into the house, could not find its way out. How it knocked, pinioned fist against the ceiling. Years ago, my heart was trapped like that. And how the starlight traveled toward me, though I was already dead. Radiation to the marrow, pharmacon swirling in my veins. Everything dies. Driving toward Venus, I want to hear what the sweet executioner says. My bones like burning matchsticks. Sometimes when I wake, I'm shaping the world with my hands. Sometimes when I sleep, the world shapes me. Once I was energy hiding inside the light or the shadow of light. Love rooted us, together, exponential. After, we spoke in tongues. Our fingers cupped the universe like water. Last poem. It's the title poem of actually my next collection. It's called The Explosion Museum. And it's a prose poem in 5 parts. So, fasten your seatbelts. Because it starts with the Big Bang. You have to imagine for this poem a museum in which exhibits are frozen in time, and they're different explosions, and they're miniaturized explosions of enormous events, and you can kind of see them in a 3D way and kind of trace, look at the epicenter and see out from where that goes. So. 1, the Big Bang. In this exhibit, a universe explodes into being. Exquisite miniature in a hovering stasis bubble, viewable from every possible angle. At the far left edge, 8 billion years into the future, our radio telescopes press their ears to the sky, so finely tuned they can hear the sound a single atom makes. Its cavitation in space, loosing into the nascent universe, a D note 20 octaves above your cochlea's register. Here is an atom that will later become part of you, then me, handed down through generations, through millennia, to those we love, to those who carry on after us. Here nebula are born, their jewels and precious metals strewn across the vacuum of space-time, the bright curving horns of protostars. So much light and the billowing diaphanous robes of elements swelling in waves, stars pinwheeling outward, the Milky Way drowning in an ocean of sparkling matter. Here is where our heart fires start, the moment everything is entangled in everything else. The singularity's inky nothingness from which everything in a glory of harmonic dissonance bursts. Invisible plumes of energy swirling from the blown-out center, spun filaments of dark matter along which galaxies are strung like pearls, the thrum of existence inside each atom, protons, electrons, neutrons, quarks all whirling in their orbits, blinking in and out of sight like fireflies on a summer evening. The first atoms fusing into molecules, chains of hydrocarbons, amino acids, proteins, complexity the universe itself cannot resist. As somewhere, illuminated by the spent hull of its embryonic shell, the first life is born. Two, extinction level event, 65 million years BCE. Captured when an asteroid the size of Manhattan impacted the Earth, annihilating the dinosaurs and most of life on Earth except for a few highly adaptable mammalian species. This, the colossal dust cloud rising from the impact site to cover an entire planet, shutting out its sun. Flames engulfing the world. Goodbye, Brontosaurus. Goodbye, Triceratops. Goodbye, Tyrannosaurus Rex. From here, you can see long necks of Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus sagging onto the ground, their massive bodies melting into tar pits, transformed by a million bubbling years to fossil fuel. Over here, a group of little animals cowering in the understory of a jungle. Our ancestors, not yet recognizable as human, possessing the intelligence of a cat or a dog. Disaster is in our DNA, the way every creation myth cradles a tale of destruction within it. Things were good, then not. In the old myths, paradise is always ruined. A colossal snake, or this ashen snow falling over the small living creatures, and the bodies of the dead will someday burn again. 3. The first nuclear test explosion, White Sands, New Mexico. These shadows of buildings from a fake town, the glassy expanse of melted sand, a sucking in of oxygen as the plutonium explosion furls into its classic mushroom shape. Eat of its flesh and die. Here the bunkered men unhuddle, realizing they've done it, unbalance the world's equation. At first, a terrible silence. Then the sound of men whooping, slapping each other on the backs. Their tongues sizzle with the heat of 1,000 suns. Note how one man rubs his eyes hard, tries not to look at the fake people, all vaporized. His caterpillar eyebrows frown while his sensitive mouth opens as if he wants to scream. His skull is shaped like the blade of an axe, and there's a rushing noise in his head. Press 201 on your audio guide if you wish to hear him say in a voice like cracking ice, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Toward the edge of the explosion, 2 Japanese cities, their blackened ruins. Further out, similar clouds shroud Bikini Atoll, parts of Russia, France, China. The smoke billows so far it engulfs all the continents and oceans, the entire planet finally disappearing under a radioactive smog. 4. Twin Towers. The plane plowing into the building, the impossible outline of the plane inside the building, the plane limned in brilliant light, an optical illusion eyewitnesses and people peering at televisions and storefront windows and living rooms report, wondering if by some miracle space-time suddenly blossomed into a new dimension so that plane and building exist simultaneously, superimposed but whole. Then the people falling. And now the people will always be falling, on TV and in our imaginations, falling from a building into history. Here we know they are dead, but there they are still falling, and our eyes are still burning image after burnt image into happening, this is happening, unable to comprehend that the falling shapes are people, though here at the edge of falling is the beginning of horror. Emergency workers covered in choking dust will always be trying to rescue the fallen, and sometimes fall themselves then and after. Families will fall into grief. Very far away from them, not quite at the edge, are the wars where other people still falling fight. Even those who do not fight are falling into the future or never to rise. And somewhere in the desert, by the Tigris or the Euphrates, north of Baghdad or south of Fallujah, is you. We are not yet falling. The RPG launched, hitting the fuel tank of your Striker, an explosion deflected downward to the dusty road, and even so it lifts the 19-ton vehicle and throws you from a rear air guard hatch into the troop hold, the arc of the falling, the trajectory that spared your life so that here, far away from those who are falling, we could meet and fall together. 5. The double flame. The sheets I clenched between my fingers, the touch and taste of you, the scent of hotel soap and the gleam of light from the moon as I showered, slicking back my hair, the curve of your body, the weight of your arm on my hip as we slept. Visitors squint to view the eternity-stoked fire, the double flame of crystallized intensity at its impossible center, its afterimage floating on their retinas like the shadow of an embryo. And this is the one you never see coming. Everything entangled. The atom split. The universe